are the only two people known to have seen Oswald entering the building. Fraser says he was carrying a package. Doherty says he was not. Contradictions like this one will become a recurring theme throughout the rest of this video. We'll take a closer look at the missing curtain rods in a later chapter, but for now, let's stay with Oswald. As the morning progressed, Oswald was seen working as normal. Roy Truly described him as an above-average worker who mostly kept himself. In fact, he was a bit of a mystery to his colleagues.
On the way back and forth between Irving and Dallas, did you talk very much to each other?
No, sir, not very much. He was one of these types that just didn't talk.
I was acquainted with Lee Oswald during the time he was employed at the book depository, but I never did get to know him well. He did not mix with the other employees and did not appear to want to make friends with me or any of the others.
Did you ever speak to Oswald?
Yes, sir.
Did he ever speak to you?
No, sir.
He never replied to you.
No, sir.
Would you say he was unfriendly?
Yes, sir, I would.
But there were exceptions to his reticence, and one of them occurred on this Friday morning. James Jarman was working on the ground floor when he observed Oswald staring at the window facing Elm Street.
Oswald was standing up in the window, and I went to the window also, and he asked me, what were people gathering around the corner for? And I told him that the president was supposed to pass in the morning, and he asked me did I know which way he was coming. And I told him, yes, he'll probably come down Main and turn on Houston and then back again on Elm. Then he said, oh, I see. And that was all.
It's a brief yet fascinating moment. It almost seems as though Oswald had no idea that Kennedy would pass by the book depository. But this was indeed the case for some of his colleagues. Jarman himself had only been made aware of the fact shortly before he spoke with Oswald. There's no doubt that Oswald knew the president was coming to Dallas, but whether he knew the route of the motorcade is much more difficult to prove. The route of the motorcade had only been finalized a few days before the visit and hinged upon its destination. Kennedy was supposed to attend a banquet in Dallas, but no one could agree on the venue. It came down to two options: the Trade Mart northwest of downtown or the Women's Building to the east. One of the more vocal proponents of the Trade Mart was Texas Governor John Connally, and after much back and forth, he finally got his way on November 14th. Had the Women's Building been selected, the motorcade would have spread through Dealey Plaza, east on Main Street, significantly further away and perpendicular to the book depository. Not to mention that First Lady Jacqueline would have been seated between the building and the president. The selection of the Trade Mart meant that the motorcade would now head west on Main Street and make these turns through Dealey Plaza to reach the northbound lanes on the freeway. Now, these turns could still have been avoided had the motorcade continued like so and not taken the freeway. But since the freeway was a more scenic and expedient route, it was the more attractive choice. All of that is to say, the success of the assassination was largely dependent upon the selection of the Trade Mart. It might therefore be tempting to cast suspicion upon Governor Connally, but it should be noted that he rode in the presidential limousine along with the Kennedys and suffered grave injuries during the shooting. Not only that, but Connally was actually opposed to a motorcade and favored a more direct route from this airport to the Trade Mart, a brief trip that would have bypassed Dealey Plaza altogether. He was unfortunately overruled by Kennedy himself, who wanted to see and be seen by the people of Dallas. Okay, so all that was happening behind the scenes, but as far as the public was aware, there wasn't even going to be a motorcade. As late as November the 15th, the Dallas Morning News reported that the motorcade seemed unlikely. But the very next day, the parade was finally confirmed. While the precise route followed by maps and detailed descriptions was not officially disclosed until November the 19th, someone familiar with Dallas could have approximated the route a few days in advance. That is to say, the earliest point a member of the public could have deduced that Kennedy would be driven past the book depository was November the 16th, less than a week before the visit. There's a good chance that Oswald saw these articles because he'd been observed reading political columns in the various newspapers. Furthermore, we know from other aspects of Oswald's life that he was politically inclined.
Well, I have studied Marxist philosophy, yes sir, and also other philosophers. but are you a Marxist?
I think you did admit on an earlier radio interview that you consider yourself a
Well, I
Marxist.
would very definitely say that I am a Marxist. That is correct. But that does not mean, however, that I'm a communist.
What is the difference between the two?
Well, there's a great deal of difference. Several American parties in several countries are based on Marxism, such as Ghana. Certain countries have characteristics of a socialist system, such as Great Britain with its socialized medicine. These, then, are the differences between an outright communist country and countries which adhere to leftist or Marxist principles.
Conversely, a lack of interest in politics is precisely why at least one of Oswald's colleagues remained oblivious to the movement. So while it's understandable for someone apolitical to be taken off guard by a presidential visit, it makes far less sense for someone like Oswald.
On November 21st, the day before the assassination that you were describing, was there any discussion between you and your husband about President Kennedy's trip or proposed trip to Texas, Dallas, and the Fort Worth area?
I asked Lee whether he knew where the president would speak and told him that I would very much like to hear him and to see him. I asked him how this could be done, but he said he didn't know how to do that and didn't enlarge any further on the subject.
Had there ever
This
been...
was also somewhat unusual, his lack of desire to talk about that subject any further.
How did you think it was unusual? Could you explain that?
The fact that he didn't talk a lot about it, he merely said something as an answer and did not have any further comments.
Do you mean by that, usually he would discuss a matter of that kind and show considerable interest?
Yes, of course. He would have told me who would be there and where this would take place.
We'll never know what Oswald was thinking when he spoke with James Jarman shortly before the assassination. But it is worth repeating, though, that Oswald was hired on October the 15th. That's a full month before the Moatgate rout was decided, let alone announced to the public. On the morning of November 22nd, a handful of employees have been assigned to install a new private floor on the 6th floor of the Book Depository. Every once in a while, they would catch a glimpse of Oswald.
I saw Lee Oswald shortly before lunchtime. He was by himself with a piece of paper in his hand. I had nothing to say to him, but some of the other male employees teased him and told him he ought to go get a haircut. Lee Oswald just laughed at this remark.
Shortly before noon, it was time for lunch. For a bit of fun, they decided to race the 2 elevators down to ground level. As they began descending, they observed Oswald now standing on the 5th floor. He shouted for them to stop or to close the gate to the elevator upon reaching the 1st floor. Charles Givens then realized he'd forgotten his jacket and cigarettes up on the 6th floor. About to return to ground level, Givens spotted Oswald approaching.
Lee was coming from the window up front where the shots were fired from.
Did you watch where he walked to?
Well, no, sir. I didn't pay much attention. I was getting ready to get on the elevator, and I said, "Boy, you going downstairs?"
What did he say to you?
I say, "It's near lunchtime." And he said, "No, sir. When you get downstairs, close the gate to the elevator. That means the elevator on the west side. You can pull both gates down, and it'll come up by itself."
What else did he say?
That is all. I said, "Okay," and got on the elevator.
And with that, Givens became the last person inside the Book Depository known to have seen Oswald before the assassination. At least, that's the official story. The encounter was fixed at 11:55, more than half an hour before the shooting. But other employees claim to have seen Oswald in other parts of the building around the same time or even later than Givens. Givens himself provided conflicting accounts. But I'm getting ahead of myself. This encounter notwithstanding, Givens was not the last person to visit the 6th floor. Shortly after Givens had left, Bonnie Williams grabbed his lunch and went upstairs. He sat down right about here to await the president's arrival.
Now, when you were sitting by the window, could you see down towards the southeast corner?
No, sir. I couldn't see anything as I remember there. About the only thing that I could see from there would be the top edge of the window because the boxes were stacked up.
Did you see anyone else up there that day?
No, I did not.
The southeast corner is the location from where the shots that kill the president are believed to have been fired, the so-called sniper's nest. Williams says he was alone, but admits his view was obstructed by tall stacks of boxes. Meanwhile, down by the main entrance, someone was attempting to gain access to the building.
I met an elderly white man at the entrance of the building who asked me to direct him to a restroom. The man was very old and feeble and could hardly make it up the steps. About 5 minutes later, I saw this man leave the building and enter an old Buick automobile with 3 elderly white women. The Buick then drove away.
Did you see him talk to anyone in the building?
No, he went straight out.
This individual was never identified and is the only unknown person known to have entered the book depository before the shooting. After finishing his lunch up on the 6th floor, Bonnie Williams heard the voices of James Jarman and Harold Norman emanating from the floor below. Feeling a bit lonely, Williams went down to the 5th floor and joined his 2 colleagues. The exact time of Williams' departure is unclear, but it was likely no more than 10 or even 5 minutes before the shooting. On the grounds below, a sea of spectators lined the streets of Elm and Houston. Every once in a while, one of them would glance up at the book depository. Indeed, Jarman, Williams, and Norman were spotted on multiple occasions, leaning out the far east windows on the 5th floor. But movement could also be seen on the floor above them, a floor that, by all accounts, was now supposed to be empty.